I miss my grandmothers. Those are the words that my 6-year-old daughter said to me one day. And when she said it to me, it caught me off guard because it seemed to come out of nowhere. I remember that day vividly. We were playing in the front yard of our home. We had the water sprinklers on, and we even had the kiddie pool out. And she would run through the sprinklers and jump in the kiddie pool, then jump out the kiddie pool and run back through the sprinklers. And I was sitting on the front porch in my lawn chair watching her. And as she ran back and forth, she seemed like she was having so much fun. And then she stopped. And she ran over to me, and she started crying. And I said, "What's wrong? Why are you crying?" And she said, "I miss my grandmothers." It was at that moment that I realized that my daughter was still grieving the loss of both of her grandmothers. And so I had to ask myself a question: what would happen to my daughter if I was no longer here? And little did she know that I myself was grieving also. And not only was I grieving, but to the extent that I was thinking of taking my own life by suicide. But again, the question came to me: what would happen to my daughter if I was no longer here? My daughter, who was my only child. My daughter, who was a daddy's girl. My daughter, who was dealing with the grief of losing both of her grandmothers. What would happen to her if she lost me as well? That day, I realized I couldn't take my own life via suicide, because if I took my life, I would be taking hers as well. I believe that all of us will or have dealt with suicidal ideation at some point in our lives, whether it's a fleeting thought or a deep consideration. Today, I want to challenge you to learn to have fun with suicidal ideation. And I know that sounds like a contradiction, because clearly there's nothing fun about suicide or suicidal ideation. But if you or anyone that you know have dealt with suicidal ideation or depression, did you know that you may feel that your happiness and your healing are just beyond your reach? But I'm here to tell you that even if they may be deferred, but they're not denied. And I know you're saying, "Ernest, how would you know?" Well, I'm glad you asked. Because if you had met me some years ago, you would have met me at a time when I was living the American dream. I was young, in my 20s, had my health and strength. I had my dream job as a bricklayer working in construction. I was making about $40 an hour, so I was doing okay financially. I also was newly married. I married a young lady who I had been dating for some years, and she gave birth to our only child, my daughter, Ashanti James. We even bought our first house. It was a 3-bedroom ranch with 2 bathrooms, a finished basement with a bar. It had a detached garage where my wife kept her car, I kept my pickup truck, as well as my motorcycle. We even had a dog. We named her Simba after the Lion King. So if you had met me at that time, in my 20s, with my health and strength, great family, great home, with all the toys and the dog, you would have met me at a time when I was living the American dream, until that dream started to become a nightmare. The economy started to go down, and our country went into a recession. And so going into a recession, there was no work. So financially, it took a hardship on myself and my family. And that, with some other things, began to have a negative effect on my marriage. And before I knew it, I found myself unemployed, in debt, and going through a divorce. This would be the beginning of my suicidal ideations. Then one day, I got a phone call from my mother-in-law, who I loved dearly and was very close to. She told me she wasn't feeling well and she would have to go to the doctor in order to get checked out. Upon her going to the doctor, we found out that she had cancer. And not only did she have cancer, but it was in the last stages, and there was nothing that they could do for her. A little time after that, she passed away. Not long after that, I got another phone call from my own mother, who again told me that she wasn't feeling well either. We would find out that she had cancer as well, and also she would pass away. This is what led my daughter to saying that she missed her grandmothers. So at this time, I found myself living what I call a D life. I was in debt, I was in depression, I was going through a divorce, and I was dealing with the loss and the death of two women that I loved dearly, my mother and my mother-in-law. So if you see this, you can understand why I will find myself in a deep depression. And if any one of you have dealt with depression or suicidal ideations, you know that it catches you and it drags you down into a deep pit that everyone don't make it out of. But fortunately for me, I was able to make it out. So today, I would like to share with you the way that I made it out, and that you may learn to use this same thing in order for you to make it out. And that is to learn to have fun with suicidal ideations. And so when we look at the word fun, it's an acronym which stands for focus, unite, and normalize. So first, we have to focus. You have to focus on yourself or someone who's important to you. When I was going through at this time, I found myself feeling like I was in a situation that I could do nothing about. I cannot change my circumstances at all. I couldn't bring my jobs back. I couldn't bring my wife back. I couldn't bring my mother back. So I was in a space where I could not control the circumstances that I was living in. And so I began to feel hopeless and helpless. Because I focused so much on myself and the things that I could not change, it just drew me deeper and deeper into a depression. So today, I learned to change my focus. I took my focus off of myself and I put it on my daughter, because I had to stay here for her. I had to make sure she was okay, and I had to make sure that she was all right. Now, I have this conversation with a therapist, and the therapist told me, Ernest, we tell our clients to focus on themselves. That way, they can deal with all of their personal issues. Well, I'm not a therapist, so I can't say who's right or who's wrong. So whether you have to focus on yourself or focus on someone you love, just make sure that you focus. Secondly, we have to unite. Unite with like-minded people or support groups. During the time of my depression, I joined a support group doing bereavement support. They really helped me because I was in an environment of like-minded people going through like-minded experiences. I was in a room with people who had lost parents, who had lost children, and who have lost spouses. And we all understood each other because we were going through the same thing. I stayed there because they were so helpful to me that I became a volunteer after my sessions was up. And after a year of volunteering, I left and I started a nonprofit organization bringing bereavement support to the community. I named it Anne Christine Charities. Anne, after my mother, and Christine, after my mother-in-law. So when you're going through, make sure that you connect and you unite with like-minded people that understand your situation. Lastly, we have to normalize. So you have to embrace your new normal. Your new normal was a phrase that I learned in bereavement, which means I had to learn to accept that although nothing would be the same again, it still could be normal. It'd just be a new normal. I had to accept that my finances were in a different place. That was my new normal. I had to accept that I was now a divorced father co-parenting my daughter. That was my new normal. I had to accept that I could no longer see and call my mother or my mother-in-law on a daily basis as I was used to. That, again, was my new normal. I had to accept that although things would be different than they were in the past, they still could be normal. They would just become my new normal. So I want you all to embrace these ideas, because if you're dealing with depression, if you're dealing with suicidal ideations, if you're dealing with anything that is so heavy that you need to reach out for help, learn to have fun with it. Focus on yourself or someone you love. Unite with like-minded people or support groups. And normalize your new reality by embracing it as your new reality. And when you do this, you'll be able to overcome suicidal ideations, depressions, and live to see another day for yourself and also for those that you love. Thank you.